All right. Hello, all. So this is my presentation on my paper about autism and employment, which I thought was very fascinating as someone in the workforce now, wanted to understand, the dynamics of that from someone with autism and autism spectrum disorder and how they see it. So, my question proposed for this whole paper was really what is the employment experience like for individuals with autism spectrum disorder? What I looked for was supporting evidence on existing services, what those existing services were, criticisms of existing services. There's pros and cons to all sides. Sometimes, long-standing best, sometimes it's actually detrimental, or inefficient. Like it does serves no purpose. And I also looked at the workplace issues and barriers of the employment experience for those with ASD. So this could be how an employer talks to them, how often they get a break, how different workforces interact with them, how coworkers see them or interact with them. There's so many things that could be a factor, and maybe not just with ASD, but to all disabilities as well, right? Like, what are the barriers? What are the issues that arise? And so the thesis sentence, my ending statement of what tied into my question was long-term stable interventions and services lead to better employment outcomes for individuals with autism spectrum disorder. Simple, right? Like that's what I'm claiming, that's what I'm going and saying. Now, the research has two sides. There is supporting and there is opposing. So when the supporting research that supports my thesis, it says that early intervention is key. So you got to start early, you got to start them young, starting it from 3, right? Preschool, early childhood, so that's where you see elementary school come in, that's then progressing into middle school, high school, and onward, right? So having the ability to start an individual with autism in services young allows them to maximize and optimize their chances of bettering their communication, social skills, workplace readiness. And by workplace readiness, this means like all applicable skills. This could be communication, this could be socialization, this could be self-analysis, self-awareness, this could be analysis of their own skills, analysis of items they're looking at. Like there's so many elements that play into the factor of workplace readiness. It could even just mean school readiness as well, right? Holistic skill buildings. So this is continuous support, which, as I mentioned with early intervention, goes from preschool to elementary to middle to high onward, right? So the goal with this is to provide individuals with the ability to continue from high school. So go into college, whether it's a bachelor or community or do a program or go into the workforce just right away, right? So it's providing them the ability and services and skills to succeed as individuals without ASD may succeed. And so that's like the main question I had was what's the experience and are we able to accurately provide them resources for independence or for success in the workforce that we have in an according and appropriate manner. Uh, so then there's obviously systemic workplace barriers. So there is huge reports of underemployment and lack of coordination, as I mentioned during the introduction, that, what's the case for those who the employers just don't understand how to approach it during an interview? What about for the cases of those where they're doing a task like with coworkers and it's not fitting. So several current resources try to help with communication, but aren't, fully meeting it. And that's why it needs to be long-term support because it meets all those levels of developmental standard. And so the US Department of Labor has actually been huge in finding like the actual like real life stats of who's currently working, what are we achieving, and what's being held currently, rather than just what's researched side. We have like actual statistics and data of current workforce individuals. Um, this also ties into the employer impact and the long-term success, as I mentioned, of is it inclusive? Are they meeting the needs? Do they feel burnout? Like, do the individuals with ASD experience autism burnout? Do they experience like a burnout of covering face, of masking? And does that reach a point where they're overwhelmed sensory, overwhelmed emotionally, and then can't be competent, aren't capable, sorry, to continue working? And this can be seen in Scott et al., who between Scott et al. 2019 and Smith et al. 2021, there's actually a lot of stuff that is also opposing to my thesis, and I'll talk about that next. Um, so now we're into opposing research. So this is where we see, similar in the supporting, that long-term elements are great for the success of an individual, like, right? We also then see that there are critical employment gaps. This is seen by Baker Erickson et al. And his coworkers in a paper they wrote in 2022, where they estimated that about 80% of adults with ASD are unemployed and 66% of transition age youth, so 18 to like 25, I think is their estimate of transition age, fail to move into post-secondary education or work. So that's actually a huge number. That's over 50% of them struggle following high school, which then makes the following bullets of fragmented intervention models, lack of real world readiness, and inaccessible support systems so huge to look into and focus on. Of yes, we have long-term support and long-term support is great, but is the existing long-term support actually doing its job? Are we doing more than just preparing them to go into a classroom and talk with students and peers? Or are we like, right? So that's the question of, are we providing the skills? This applies to basic high school and middle school experience as well, but mainly for individuals with ASD, it focuses on the fact that, you know, are they actually are the supports actually providing real world skills? Can they be applied in real world skills in real world settings without someone constantly by their side? Or for those that do need someone by their side, is it in a accessible, appropriate, proper manner? Like, are they able to function in the workplace as well? And how can we reach that? Is it like, are we struggling with interview support? Are we struggling with team cooperation and interactions? And the huge thing also is having employers and companies informed on how to better incorporate individuals with autism. So in the next slide, I talk about the implications of this. So Baker Erickson et al. And their company from 2022 is a great paper. I really enjoyed reading it. And it talked about the limitations, right? So we're limited on what currently exists, right? There is a limit. And what's happening right now is good, but it could be so much better. And Scott et al., Smith et al., they all talk about it. And you can also see that in the new US Department of Labor's paper on the statistics of what actually happens. Same with the CDC. So there's huge gaps in what is currently being serviced, what exists for service. So people aren't properly getting service as the CDC shares, which could be improved. The people that are getting the service and supports aren't actually ideal for long-term experiences and life goals of working, going in the workforce, living like independent. So that's where employment experience, I had the question. So it also talks about the need for environmental adaptation, so long-term success, uh, and accessibility. So that means like employers understanding that, and this is why I chose the squiggly, is they're going to reach the same goal. That steps along the way just are going to be different. And so that's part of it, of the individualized training support and the need for environmental adaptations is all these papers and resources are saying that, hey, individuals with autism are going to go like this. They might need their break. They might need, you know, to work solo at times. They might need less sensory overload. Like they might need extra support or they might need a lack of involvement, right? But at the end, obviously, there's a standard that they're going to reach it. Like they've got so many skills, let's utilize it. They've got a fabulous working brain, let's utilize it. And so that's like the implications that I see with the employment experience is there's so much that can be achieved, but the issue is achieving it in a proper and appropriate manner and doing it in a way that is long lasting. So personally, I really stood out with the real world versus theory. So there, Baker Erickson talks about it, and Smith does as well, of the what we see in lab settings is not what we experience in real life. And just achieving this is super important as well to just provide individuals with the help they need, with the services they need, and just reaching all the goals for that individual to succeed. There is also the reevaluation of how it's done. So, do all individuals actually need long-term support? Or could it be, excuse me, is like elementary, middle, great for some, and they take a break during high school, and then they circle back around to getting support and services come end of high school that allows them to understand and recognize their independent skills that need to be focused on to succeed in the workforce and post school. So, do they need to focus on a communication skill? Do they need to focus on this skill? And there's actually some, I believe it was Baker Erickson that actually provided ideas of a VR. Like there's a virtual reality type interview uh, option for support services that's kind of coming in the works, but wasn't huge in the works. And that's, I think, quite impressive to have. So in conclusion, there's a need to shift from systemic to from individual to systemic responsibility. So we need to go from just focusing on what the individual needs to work on to what everyone needs to work on, the company, the government, society, and the individual, right? It's a whole system. It's not just one person. So working on that and removing the burden. There is also the need to target trainings and turn research lab settings into real world experiences, as well as uh, there is a need for equipped systems. So having government and employers ready for the needs of individuals with autism spectrum disorder is huge. And here's the references: Autism Speaks, Baker Erickson, CDC, DeFrancesco, Fong, Interagency Autism Coordinating Committee, National Institute of Health, Scott et al., Smith et al., and U.S. Department of Labor.